All right, let's break down what might just be one of the biggest economic shakeups of the decade. This is a story that's packed with high-stakes geopolitics, some serious brinkmanship, and a massive strategic pivot that, honestly, almost nobody saw coming. I mean, think about it. Just a year ago, the relationship between the world's two largest democracies was spiraling into a nasty, full-blown trade war. We're talking tariffs hitting an almost unbelievable 50%. And then, almost overnight, it all just flipped. That trade war didn't just fizzle out. Oh no, it completely transformed into a massive $500 billion strategic and economic alliance. So, the big question is, how on earth did that happen? Let's get into it. Okay, so the first and frankly most stunning part of this whole story is the tariff reset. This is the move that stopped the bleeding and really paved the way for everything that came next. The sheer scale of this drop is just staggering. You see, that 50% tariff wasn't just one single number. It was a 25% reciprocal tariff with another 25% penalty just piled right on top. And then, bam, it gets slashed all the way down to a much more stable 18%. For Indian businesses, this was a total game changer. So what was that extra 25% all about? Well, it was a punitive tariff. Think of it less as an economic tool and more as a political one. It's designed to pressure a country into changing its behavior. And in this case, the US put it on the table for one very specific reason. India was buying a whole lot of Russian oil, and Washington really wanted that to stop. That was the core of the conflict. Now, to really understand why this deal was so absolutely critical, we have to rewind and look at just how bad things got back in 2025. It was a super fast escalation that brought both countries right to the edge. This timeline just shows you how quickly it all went down. In April 2025, the US kicks things off with that first 25% tariff. By August, they double down, adding the 25% penalty over the oil issue, pushing the total to 50%. But then look at November. Here's a little twist. Even with all this tension, General Electric signs a massive billion-dollar engine deal. That's a little sign that behind the scenes, strategic interests were still churning away. Then January 2026, things get wild with threats of 500% tariffs. And just 1 month later, everything flips with this new agreement. So yeah, that insane escalation is what finally forced both sides to the table. And what they came up with was a classic quid pro quo, a gigantic strategic trade-off. The headline number is just mind-blowing. $500 billion. And let's be clear, this isn't some vague promise. It is a hard commitment right at the heart of this deal. India has pledged to buy $500 billion worth of American goods over the next 5 years. This fundamentally rewrites its entire import strategy. So let's break down what India promised. The absolute key point is the pivot away from Russian energy. That is the huge geopolitical give. Then you've got that massive $500 billion shopping list for U.S. energy, aircraft, and tech. And on top of all that, India also agreed to open up its own markets, cutting its own tariffs and getting rid of some of those tricky non-tariff barriers, like the ones that were hitting American medical devices. Okay, so what did the U.S. offer in return? Well, the immediate relief was obviously cutting that crippling tariff down to 18% and getting rid of that punitive part completely. But it went even further. Washington granted zero-duty access for some of India's most important exports. We're talking generic drugs, gems, and aerospace parts. This wasn't random. It was a very targeted move to boost strategic sectors in India. You know, this whole agreement is about so much more than just tariffs and dollars and cents. It's really the economic foundation for a much, much deeper geopolitical alliance. And the key idea here is a concept called friendshoring. Basically, both the US and India are trying to make their supply chains safer. The whole goal is to move the production of really important stuff, critical goods, away from potential rivals like China and into countries that are allies. This trade deal is the engine that's making India a top destination for that strategy. And this strategy is being locked into place through a new framework called the Trust Initiative. It actually builds on an older tech partnership, but it massively expands the scope. So it's not just about AI and semiconductors anymore. Now it includes things like critical minerals, biotech, and even a detailed plan to build out India's AI infrastructure using American tech. It's a blueprint for really deep, long-term tech integration. And let's be super clear about something. This is not happening in a vacuum. Officials have directly, explicitly linked this trade deal to the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the Quad. It's all about using economic partnership as a tool to strengthen a strategic bloc that's designed to act as a counterweight to China's influence across the entire Indo-Pacific region. So, with a deal this massive, there are always going to be winners and losers. Who exactly comes out on top? And what are the big risks moving forward? When you look at the winners, you can really see the smart design here. For instance, in textiles, India gets a huge price advantage over its competitors in the American market. In aerospace, India gets zero-duty access for its parts, while the US locks in billions in new aircraft orders. In tech, India gets to become a secure hub for things like semiconductors, while US companies get to build out its entire digital backbone. See, it's designed to be a win-win for these key industries. But of course, not everyone is celebrating. On the flip side, there are some really serious concerns, especially coming from India's powerful agricultural sector. This quote from a major farmers union really captures that fear. The fear that opening the floodgates to American farm goods could just devastate the livelihoods of millions of local Indian farmers. This is a big deal, and it represents a major domestic hurdle for the agreement's future. And this all points to the biggest strategic challenge for India. It's an incredibly delicate balancing act. How does a country embrace this deep new economic tie-up with the US, while at the same time managing its decades-long strategic and defense partnership with Russia, which is still its #1 source for military hardware? This is a major foreign policy tightrope, and one wrong step could have huge global consequences. So, in the end, the US and India have tied their futures together in a really profound way. The question isn't if they're a team anymore. The real question is whether this incredibly powerful new partnership has what it takes to actually reshape the global economic order, or if all the immense pressures from farmers at home to strategic rivals abroad will eventually pull this fragile new alliance apart.